we will go ahead and get our program started. So again, welcome to our TPE panel. Our focus for this panel discussion, we really want this to be an open discussion for all of our folks on the call today. Our focus will be working abroad or thinking about working abroad internationally as a student affairs professional. We, as a TPE committee, we tend to get a lot of questions about how folks can look at potentially working abroad, or if you are an international person working within the United States, how do you start that process as well? And so we wanted to make sure that we dedicated some time space to this particular topic. And so just to do some quick introductions, my name is Dr. Tim Leyson. I serve as an Associate Director of Residence Life at Santa Clara University, but I am also a member of the TPE Steering Committee, and I specifically work with our employer relations. So, but I have the honor of serving as the moderator for this panel today. And so there are a number of other folks on the call today from our TPE Steering Committee. Dr. Kirsten Fox, who's the director of the Placement Exchange, Brenda Ice, who's the current chair of our TPE 2021 process, and then Kirby R. Gibson, who is the chair-elect for our 2021-2022 TPE experience. So really excited to be with you all today, but we have three phenomenal panelists who are all going to share a little bit about their experiences and where they're at currently, and all of those things, and then we will delve right into some questions that were already submitted. So if our panelists, we can feel free to, we'll start with Abigail, and then go Tikesha and then Jane. If you all can introduce yourself, where you're currently at, and your experience in working internationally, or just your current experience of what it's like to be where you're at. So Abigail, feel free to take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Tim, and thank you, TPE, for putting this together. Definitely when I was going through the job search process, I wish I had such a space. So for those of y'all who are here, we're going to definitely provide you some great information. So as Tim mentioned, my name is Abigail Smith. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm originally from Kingston, Jamaica. So yes, that's where I was raised. I came here 9 years ago for college. I did my undergrad in Virginia. Then I did my master's at University of Connecticut. And then straight from there, I was hired with an H-1B position where I'm at now, Pace University in New York, Westchester. So there's no one size fits all to kind of how I got here. As you know, I'm sure every international person that you will speak to has a very different path to how they got to where they are. But I do hope that through my experience, I can at least help you with some information that I wish I would have had when I was in your spot.
All right, I think I'm up next. I'm Tikesha Morgan, she, her pronouns. I identify as a Black queer woman working in higher ed now for 20 years. This marks my 20th year working in higher ed full time. For me, working internationally, I actually am from New York City, Brooklyn, New York originally. Lived in Boston for 13 years where my career really took off. And I've been in the Netherlands now for 4.5 years as the Senior Student Affairs Officer, the inaugural Senior Student Affairs Officer for Emerson's European Center campus located in the Netherlands. So our university actually has property. We actually have a 14th century castle in the Netherlands that we own and operate. And actually that's where I'm coming from right now because I actually live at the castle also too. So it's been a beautiful ride so far. For me, I wasn't looking to work abroad. I love to travel, but this is kind of something I stumbled into in regards to having the diversity experience in my field. And when they created this role, they were looking for kind of an inside person at Emerson to go over to do this program, someone who could really connect Boston and our European Campus Center in regards to student affairs and academic affairs. So I actually left from working under student affairs as a student affairs officer, as a diversity officer at the time, and came over reporting under academic affairs now with quite a bit of a dotted line to student affairs, working very closely with that division on our campus. So thank you so much to our TPE. I'm happy to be here. I think this is a discussion we need to have to really amplify especially during these times, what it means to work and live abroad, and have the experience outside of maybe your home country. So thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jane Palmer. I'm the Associate Director for Global Commerce at Denison University in Granville, Ohio. Thank you for having me here today, TPE and ACUHO-I. Really pleased to have this opportunity. Super excited to hear from my fellow panelists as well. So I look forward to continuing being connected. But kind of similar in a way to kind of combination of both Abby and Tikesha, my experience with international education really began when I was 9 months old, and my family moved me from Canada, where I was born, to the UK, which is where my dad is from. And I enrolled in a nursery school as a 3-year-old and started my education. And since that time, I have lived in the UK, in Ohio, in the US. And at that time, as an elementary school student, I was here on an L2 visa. My dad was transferred here to work. And so I was on a dependent working visa, a dependent visa, and went to a school, the only international student at a small rural school in Central Ohio. And then our visa was no longer renewable. And so my father left and moved to the Netherlands. And then my sister and I remained in the US so she could finish high school. And we became our our school district and our county's first F1 ever students back in the 80s. And then after that, I moved to the Netherlands as well, spent all 4 years of high school just outside of Den Haag in Wassenaar, went to an American international school where half of my classmates were US citizens and the other half were from all over the world. And it was amazing, life-changing experience. I then came back to Ohio, and I went to Wittenberg University, small liberal arts, studied French, knew that I did not want to be a French scholar or French professor, and looked around and somebody said, but look, somebody helped you get, I was an F1 student at Wittenberg, and somebody said, somebody helped you get here. Somebody's job is to help international students get to US colleges. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And didn't think of that. And so I went then and got my master's at Ohio State in higher ed and student affairs, and was very fortunate that my assistantship placement was with the Office of International Education, working with our study abroad team. And so then my professional life experience in international higher ed really transitioned and focused on helping our US students get abroad. But I also then had an opportunity to work with our international immigration, or international student immigration team. And so I was able to help students who were coming to the US as well into the education system and start navigating that. What do I do after I graduate from Ohio State and I want to stay in the US? And so after I transitioned from being an international student, I then obtained a work visa to continue my work at Ohio State. As a Canadian citizen, I was able to slide in the NAFTA agreement. So I had a TN visa that allowed me a very loose interpretation of teacher that allowed me to work at Ohio State for a number of years. And then I made the transition outside of Ohio State. In that time period, I obtained my green card, my permanent residency. I married a US citizen, but somebody who I've known since we met in 4th grade. And so then I went and worked for a study abroad company, a private startup organization, and traveled the US helping students navigate finding study abroad programs. I quickly figured out that I wanted to be back on a US campus. And so I went back to Ohio State, where I worked in the College of Business, working with our undergraduate student population. My portfolio, I had all of our international undergraduate students that I worked with and helped with programming, established programming to help ease that transition and make a greater connection between our international and our domestic students in the College of Business there at Ohio State. And then I left and landed at Denison University, where I am now. We launched a new major, global commerce, which is an interdisciplinary major with a focus on the exchange of goods, people, services around the world. And so my role was to come and help set that program up at Denison. So I help students with their off-campus experience requirement, which often includes an international internship or a study abroad experience. And so that is where my international higher ed experience is currently. Sorry, that was long. I'm probably the oldest one on the panel, so I have a long history there, but I'm so pleased to be here and really, again, very excited to have some new connections.
Wow, I think our panelists just demonstrated the reason why we need this conversation, just like the different pathways that anyone has to go through, and just really great experiences. So just remind everyone, please feel free to put your questions into the chat or the Q&A feature of our webinar today, because we really want to hear from you all. And so we will dive right on into some of our questions. Is that okay? Awesome. So one of the questions that we get as a TPE committee from some of our graduate students and even current colleagues who are in the field who are not from the United States, how do they begin to navigate part of the process of being able to apply for positions within the United States? So I figured we could start within the United States and then maybe go outside of that, because that is a question that like different various forms of that question come through different committee members over the years. And so how do you, especially from like the graduate student lens, like how do you help students? How do you help those students like begin to navigate what that process is going to look like? How do they know which universities or colleges would be able to sponsor folks? Just even in my own experience, that's been somewhat of a challenge too. So I'm curious to know, like, what advice would you give? How does that work for anyone who doesn't really know what that looks like? So Abigail, I see that you are unmuted, so please feel free.
I can start with that question because I remember asking myself that millions of times. I would say, and I think I tell all students this, my best advice, my best resource were people who went through the process themselves. So don't look for your international student offices to know everything. Don't look to your professors to know everything. Don't look to, your assistantship supervisor to know everything. Make sure you reach out to people who previously went through the process, whether that recently, whether that be 5 years, because they're going to be the ones that really know what it means to go through this process and what are some things to look for. Unfortunately, during my experience, and I job searched in 2017. So during 2017, there was no website that had a list of all schools that would sponsor, right? It was really just through talking to people like, okay, that person left that school, maybe that school sponsors, or that person told me that they had an interview there and they were able to get to their last round interview, and maybe I can apply there. But at the end of the day, the school that I chose, Pace University, it was not on my radar. Nobody I knew had went to Pace. It was just that I went through the process. The hiring manager liked me. And when I brought up the visa thing, they're like, yep, I'm willing to do it. So I also don't want y'all to go into the search thinking that, because a school has never done it before, or because this school is not on my radar, that they won't. There were some schools that I stayed away from applying from. Like if someone told me like, hey, I searched last year and they told me they wouldn't have sponsored, then I wouldn't look at that school. But something I always tell students is you are also valuable, right? So like, yes, these schools that you're applying to are valuable, but you bring a lot of skills, experiences, all this other stuff to the university. So see yourself as an asset and understand what are your non-negotiables. I had some friends who are willing to go anywhere in the country, Kentucky, Alabama, California, Florida. I was like, no, I know I want to stay in the Northeast. And already as an international student, that was limiting, because what if, no one in the Northeast was willing to sponsor? So understand what are your non-negotiables. I know I wanted a smaller school. I loved my experience at UConn, but I did not want to be in a large state school for my first professional experience. So think about what are do you want to be somewhere urban, somewhere rural? Like, yes, you are international, but you also do have the ability to kind of choose where you want to go. So making sure that you have your non-negotiables within your search. And then as I said, starting early, reaching out to people who have done the process before. and kind of just sticking through the process and understanding what are some changes coming up in visa thing. I know for the past 4 years, I was terrified. Like every year I'd be like, okay, what is, 45 going to do? What are some things that I need to be looking out for? So also things are always changing. So making sure you have your plans. Like fortunately for me, I knew if the US didn't work out, I could go back home to Jamaica. I'm also a UK citizen. So I was looking in the UK for opportunities. I wasn't just looking in the US. Like you need to have a plan A, B, C, D, E, because banking, putting 100% of your eggs in the US, you're never sure what's going to happen. So I hope that answers the question, Tim.
Can I just add, like, really quickly? Again, my experience is slightly different, but absolutely what Abby has said. I think for those of you who are international on the call and you're currently in your higher ed programs, I'm assuming you're here on an F1 student visa, and so make sure that you're taking advantage of OPT when that time comes, right? So apply for OPT in that final year of your program. Talk with your International Student Services Office. She's absolutely right. They are not the experts in like employment when it comes to post F1, but they should be experts in you as an F1. So use them to help you identify when should I be applying for OPT, apply for OPT, and then you have work authorization at that point, right? And so you make sure that you're arming yourself with all of the knowledge as much as you can by speaking with people who've gone through the process, so that you can say to that future employer in an interview, like, I don't need you to sponsor me because I have OPT authorization, or I will have that already. And that can ease some of their kind of angst about this possibility. And then what you have to do is you just have to, or what you try to do, right, is you try to prove, again, your worth during that year of OPT, so that they see how valuable you are to them, and that they start the process to then sponsor you for an H-1B if that's possible. That's the kind of ideal situation, I would say. One thing that many people aren't aware, and you're lucky that many of you are probably looking, or not lucky is not the right word, but fortunate that many of you are probably looking to remain in a higher ed setting. Our institutions of higher education currently are exempt from the cap on the number of H-1B visas that are out there. So there's a limit to the number of international worker visas that the US offers each year. But there are certain institutions, nonprofit, that are nonprofit organizations are exempt from that cap. And so this is a good field to work in if you're trying to navigate the process. Again, yes, I can define OPT. Thank you. OPT is optional practical training. So every F1 visa holder, if you're here as a foreign student, you're typically here on an F1 visa. So once you have been in F1 status for 9 months, you become eligible to apply for something called curricular practical training, and then optional practical training. Optional practical training is the right to, it's a work authorization for typically 12 months. You can, once you have completed your degree requirements, you are granted 12 months to then practice your skills in a job related to your field here in the US. And curricular practical training, CPT, is during your curriculum. So you could do it as an internship in the summer in between two years.
So we've had some questions rolling in. So I'm going to read one from one of our folks who submitted. So thank you, Kayla. Their question is, I'm a young American higher ed professional with about 3 years of experience, and my dream is to live abroad and work at a university. Due to my opportunities, I have been unable to work in education abroad or international office, but have worked in student affairs and admissions. How would you all suggest getting my foot in the door so I can live and work abroad as an American?
I will speak on that because I did not have experience working in an abroad office. I am very much a traditional student affairs officer. And one of the things I get a lot of young professionals who ask me about how did I land this gig abroad. One thing I say is, as you're getting started in your career, don't turn down opportunities to participate in things on campus. I think one of the reasons I landed my position is that my background in the field of higher education, specifically student affairs, is really diverse. I've worked in housing, res life, conduct, Title IX. I'm the Title IX officer now for this campus, and the conduct officer. I also supervise the counseling services that we have here at the castle. So orientation, don't turn down opportunities just because they're sometimes unpaid on campus. Anytime an opportunity came my way, I took it and I added it to my resume. And I didn't realize what I was setting myself up for, which is the role I have now, which is running a student affairs department abroad. So, for me, this is something I always tell people when I tell my story. I wasn't looking for this. But when I stepped up and my, fellow colleagues who were candidates, I was asked to apply because of my background. And my fellow candidates who were also applying with me, who were colleagues at my institution, did not have the background I did. And I also had 10 years experience as a diversity officer on that specific campus. They wanted someone who can go abroad and think very widely and be very open to different experiences and knowing how to teach students how to be the same way as heading the student affairs department on an international campus. So for me, areas I think to look at, I got clued into NAFSA, which is basically our international affairs organization. Also, I'm finding out more. I just sat on the planning committee for our local NASPA International, which is starting to kind of have a European base, where NASPA is actually holding yearly conferences. We just had our virtual conference. Had our virtual conference here virtually in Europe. And it's not only exclusive to Europeans. So if you're somebody who's an American, you can get linked into those organizations and willing to deal with the time difference of when things are happening. I know also in the Middle East, in the UAE, I've connected with a colleague who was attending our European conference virtually, who was letting me know that there is a portion of a community there around student affairs officers, and they have their conferences there too. So, we're a little bit of everywhere. It's just getting tapped into those different organizations. But I think the key thing is don't turn things around. Don't let people abuse you. Of course, don't let that happen either. But the question I get a lot is, well, how did you get here? And I said, I didn't turn down things. Like Abigail, I like working for small universities. So my school now, it's about 4,000 students. I've only really worked for small private institutions. That's been my thing. So at small schools, you tend to get to wear multiple hats if you want to, and you want to get those experiences under your belt. And that surely landed me above and beyond my colleagues who also were applying for that position. And now I have the international piece under my belt. So as I move forward, wherever I go, I am looking to stay abroad. I'm 4.5 years in. We talked about visa. My visa is coming up here in the Netherlands. But I may be applying for a permanent residency here in the Netherlands to stay on here, or relocating to somewhere else, because now I get contacted by other international schools who know that I'm here and I've had this experience. And I'm, 20 years in my field now, full time. So, you really, put yourself out there. When I was asked to serve on the committee to help put on this virtual, yes, I'll do it. Because now that's another resume builder. That's connections I've made to the Middle East and colleagues there. You just never know when you're going to meet people and what you're going to be able to connect with. So, stay up late sometimes, go to those things that when you're a little bit tired, because you just never know who you're going to connect with. I have an amazing supervisor who's based in the States. And I have great supervision, but also leadership in the work that I do. So, I've been able to really grow and grow pretty well at my institution. I've actually been at, even though I've been in my field for 20 years, I've been at my same institution for 14. So I've also been at the same institution for a long time, and I've been able to grow. And that's usually not heard of within a small institution. So, I'm grateful for that.
And I want to add one thing to what Tikesha said, and it's interesting because I know that I don't want to work in the US for the rest of my life. I'm trying to go abroad. So I actually connected with Tikesha, I think it was maybe like 2 years ago. I just on a page that we're in on Facebook, and I'm like, she looks dope. I know I want to work abroad. I'm going to connect with her. So that's something else that y'all need to do, is reach out to people that you see connecting online. Like LinkedIn is huge to find folks. It's a great asset, great resource. If you see someone who's working abroad, to like in academic advising. And the good thing is that there are a lot of people who are abroad who want to connect with folks in America. They want to understand what y'all are doing. They want to get to, oh, you're a grad student, you're doing this. So, pitch it not as you just trying to learn from them, but them also trying to learn from you. And you never know what that connection might spark up, or what they may be able to introduce you to. So that thing around connection, and the field in the US is small, but globally it's also really small. So don't be scared to like put yourself out there and talk to strangers from around the world. And I'm going to also link an organization that I'm a part of, which is IASIS. So it's International Association of Student Affairs and Services. So it's just a global consortium of international folks. You can sign up for mentorship, see what jobs people have posted there. So people abroad are doing student affairs work. It looks very different than what it looks like in the US, but it's also really impactful for students who are in higher ed places abroad.
So there's a question that's in here that kind of ties to the ending point of what Tikesha was talking about and what Abigail was talked about. Are there certain countries abroad that have more opportunities / more of a bigger field of higher ed than other countries that you would recommend looking to or looking at?
I think it's less about the countries and more about, because almost every country in this world has higher education, right? It's whether or not they value student affairs and student services and what that looks like regionally. So I know like Australia, they're doing great work. Folks in the UK, it looks very different, but they're doing great work. You have schools in the Middle East who are like American universities abroad. So I think about like NYU, Abu Dhabi, that campus. I believe there's some other campuses too. So it's more about, okay, yes, they have higher education, but do they value student affairs and services? Are they willing to like sponsor someone to come out there and work?
Another school to think about too, I visited here is Miami University in Ohio has a campus, and I've had the pleasure of hanging out on their campus. They actually have a castle also, so we did a little castle comparison. But they're an awesome university that also has a great flourishing campus and a community in Luxembourg. Which is also a beautiful country and a very liberal country also too. So you got to do that research there. But there are American schools out there who are doing amazing abroad work in many places abroad.
Yeah, I'll just add quickly onto that. In addition, also NYU, they have campuses in multiple countries. And so when Tikesha mentioned NAFSA, so that's the acronym isn't super accurate anymore, but it's the massive professional organization for international educators, and both those who are working with international students on US campuses, those who are working with study abroad, those who are working with international scholars, so doing the visa work at institutions. So NAFSA.org, they have a job board, they post both, going both directions. The forum for education abroad is more US sending students abroad focused, but certainly again, they will have both positions posted that are come be our resident director in our campus in Singapore or wherever it may be. And then there are international institutions who are members of the forum who are bringing in US study abroad students, and they'll post jobs as well. So I would, definitely look at those resources. I have no idea, and Tikesha, you might know this, with the whole Brexit situation, with the UK pulling out of the EU, if that's going to have much impact right? Like it can be challenging for a US citizen to try to break into an international role in the EU, because there's such flow of employees across national boundaries there, but the UK has pulled out of that. And so the question is, in their higher ed system, does that then maybe open up a little bit more opportunity for a US citizen to present themselves as somebody who, I'm worth you sponsoring me to become an employee at a UK institution?
It really depends on, because here in the EU, each country is a little bit different. The Netherlands is actually pretty strict. I'm actually the first American that was sponsored to come over by my institution. So I was a bit of the guinea pig in a good way. They've taken great care of me coming over and what that process looks like. And also realize that institutions put a lot of money into sponsoring folks to go abroad. So I think when people jump easily to go abroad, there's an expense for the university to send you abroad. You think about, there are taxes to be paid. You still, if you're an American, you still got to file taxes in the US. Like, there's a lot to think about. It's not a simple process. It's definitely worth it. And I, for myself, having gone through it and having to go through, taxes in 2 countries and what that looks like, and is your institution helping to support one of those places? So, knowing the questions to ask, and that's why, as Abigail said, reach out and talk to people. And that's what I did. One of the first things I did when I was looking to go abroad, the group Abigail's talking about is the Black Student Affairs page, and I went in and I was like, who has worked abroad, who's out here? And I got a few folks that came back who worked for NYU, Abu Dhabi, Singapore, who came and really kind of just gave me information on what it means to be a Black American expat abroad, because that's a whole other thing too, another layer of this, of what it means in your identities and parts of the world you're going to be moving to. So you want to take that into consideration too. But I know here in the Netherlands, they can be quite strict. We are the only non-Dutch school or university that operates in the Netherlands. So that lets you know something, where if you go to Paris or Italy, there are multiple schools that may have places. We are the only one. So it really is going to depend on the country and what their rules and regulations are, how loose they are, how tight they are. Here in the Netherlands, it's pretty tight, but we've been here for 35 years, so we have a longevity with them. But we are still yet the only non-Dutch institution of education that operates in the Netherlands.
Sounds like there's a lot to think about when you are either trying to work abroad, or if you are a non-US citizen to work here. There's just a lot to think through in the application process. Part of our app, and this was like one of the submitted questions, but for folks who are looking at these various opportunities, what are the realistic salary expectations at universities abroad for a working professional with a master's degree in higher ed? It was part of a larger question, but actually you all have been doing a great job in answering a lot of these questions. So, but I think, because Tikesha, you brought up the aspect of paying taxes, because someone else had also asked, if you work abroad, are you subject to US taxes? And so, yes, the answer was a resounding yes. And I wrote that.
So just to know that as an American citizen, as long as you're an American citizen, you have to file taxes. You do not get the option to not file taxes. Where some other countries, if you leave and you're working somewhere else, you're not obligated. As an American citizen, I'm obligated to file taxes yearly and pay taxes whatever I'm taxed. So that is something I have to do. But I also file taxes here in the Netherlands also. So those are things to think about. And I've worked it out with a system with my institution, where we actually have a whole company that handled my visa paperwork and handles my taxes on both sides of the house to make sure it's done correctly. Because I wouldn't even want to attempt to try to do it myself. It's doable, because I've met a lot of expats who do it. But if you can have a professional who is trained and skilled in that, I feel a lot better.
And I'll just add, kind of a little bit tongue in cheek, but student affairs, it's not a lucrative career elsewhere in the world either, right? So salaries are not going to be exponentially different than they are here in the US. I think what you want to look at, again, similar to I hope what you would look at for here, but even more so, what's included in your package, right? Because living in London, in England, in the UK is drastically more expensive than if you're going to live in a different part of the UK. Or, you know, living in Singapore is one of the most expensive cities in the world, right? So is housing included? How does that work? You know, those are the types of things that you would want to look at. I can't say because I haven't, like Tikesha, I have not been employed by an institution abroad, but I have worked with many, and many colleagues who are working abroad in those institutions, and the vast majority of them do have their master's degree, typically in higher ed, but not all of them. Certainly they have might have a master's in a language or something else. But you know, I would say it's not a requirement to have your PhD. That certainly can be helpful. And if you're looking at a teaching role, that's going to be kind of expected, but in no way is it required. Another thing that to kind of consider, this is way off the chart, especially since we're talking with an audience who are currently in programs, but if you know, pursuing higher education outside of the US is also another pathway to launching an international career, right? So maybe you finish your master's degree here in the US, but at the end of it, you've really honed in on a specific area that you're really interested in, or you know that you want to go on and do your PhD. Look at some of those international institutions. There is actually one in the Netherlands, I know, that has a really renowned kind of cross-cultural higher ed program. And so look at some of those. Cheaper typically in terms of tuition, and then you know, that could open some doors.
We've got a flood of questions that have come in. So we'll start with this one because this is an interesting one. Are there short-term opportunities that are more contracted, maybe 3 to 6 months or 1 to 2 years, that can still help provide the rich experience with the intention of possibly returning back to your home country after? So sounds like an abroad experience plus, not to like use a Disney Plus reference, but like kind of sounds like that.
I'll say that for my initial contract was for 3 years. And at least some colleagues I've spoken to at other schools who are Americans working at international schools, there seems to be like a 3-year. I can't really speak on the one that's from a couple of months, 3 to 6 months. My initial contract was 3 years. It got extended 2 more for the rest of my visa while I was here, and I was really excited about it. I actually brought it up to my supervisor first, and ending my 2 years, I said, well, you know, why don't you all just keep me around for another 2 more years? And he was quite excited that I wanted to stay another 2 years. So, and yeah, some other institutions out there, I think have also 3-year. Not saying, and I don't think, you know, I can't speak for other institutions, but I know I've been always told, like, you know, if I find something else and I'm ready to go, I can go. I'm not gonna be penalized for breaking the contract. But that's something to think about. I can't speak on the months, but I know I've mentioned to my supervisor, I think it would be great to, and I don't know if it's out there already, for graduate assistantships, like, you know, spending a semester or a year somewhere serving as a internship for student affairs and in a student affairs office internationally, I think would be awesome experience. Or even as someone fresh out of grad school, being able to like do hall director work for a year or 2, and, you know, only contract them for like a year, go get that experience and go back. And then you get a taste and you know if this is really for you or not, and if you want to explore that more.
I definitely think, based on what Tikesha is saying, these are things that you might have to self-create. So you might not go on the university's website and see, yes, come and be a hall director for 2 years abroad. It might take you reaching out to the director of that department, being like, hey, this is my experience. This is how I think I could align, and like say, okay, what are we bringing you abroad for? Are you going to help us with training? Are you going to help us with, you know, revamping or selection process for, I don't know, full-time professionals? Are you going to help us with the residential curriculum? So the opportunities are definitely there. There was a UConn had a program where we went abroad for 3 weeks to Scotland, university in Scotland, to do assessment experience. And that's how I got experience, you know, in the UK and Scotland. And when I was talking to folks there, I was trying to find things to do, like, okay, can I work in residential life for a little bit? Can I do some international experience work for a little bit? And they're like, yeah, sure, why not? So those were things I was able to self-create. But I don't think, especially now, because student affairs is becoming more widely accepted by universities, and they're trying to figure out what it looks like for themselves, especially abroad. You know, folks are trying to raise their citizens up to be able to fill some of these roles. So it might take you reaching out to be like, hey, I see y'all might have this need, or I'm interested in doing some of this work here. And it might not be great pay. Maybe they'll give you somewhere to stay. So financially you can foot that, be like, yeah, I just want to be here. I want to help y'all out. I want to shadow for a month or two. So don't be scared, like asking. The worst thing you can hear is no. But there's so many universities abroad where you could possibly do that work to do. And look, in the Caribbean is also a place. As someone from Jamaica, the University of West Indies system has great higher education. I know Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados. So looking at some of those places, which is, you know, closer to the US than may say going to the Middle East or going to the UK, is also helpful too.
I'll just add on really quickly. I put in the chat that the Fulbright system does have a specific program for US education administrators. So it is possible, once you get in the field and you have some experience, you can apply for a short-term Fulbright exchange where you could then be placed at an institution abroad. A former grad school classmate of mine who was a colleague at Denison, we overlapped only very, very briefly, but he was awarded one of these Fulbrights and spent some time in Europe as part of this exchange. And also, again, just to reiterate what Abby said, you might have to self-create and reach out and do this. Just a couple years ago, a Denison alumni who graduated in 2018, he went to, or 2017, excuse me, he went to Ohio State to do their higher ed program. And he reached out to me because he knew that I was sending a group of Denison students to the American University of Paris for 6 weeks in the summer. And he reached out to me and said, hey, Jane, you know, I just graduated from Denison a year ago. I'm a hall director at Ohio State. I'm looking for an international experience for the summer. You know, is there an opportunity? And so we were able to work out that he became our resident director for that 6-week summer program in Paris. And he worked with the student affairs, director of student affairs at American University of Paris as his internship. And so we didn't pay him, but we provided him with housing and airfare to get there. And he filled a role for us as well. So look at those types of opportunities. Go back to your undergraduate institutions, see where they're sending students, particularly in the summer, and say, hey, do you need somebody to go with them as a student affairs professional? You do not have somebody from your institution currently that can do that. And I'm willing to do it, you know, if you can cover my airfare and provide my housing. I think that's a great way to maybe start.
And I know a number of our questions have really revolved around, like, where do I look for resources? So please, thank you to our 3 panelists for like providing articles and links and all that kind of good stuff. From a TPE perspective, we do have universities that are represented internationally that do attend TPE to find folks for various positions. So I know it's been mentioned in the chat a little bit earlier, but last year we had NYU Abu Dhabi that interviewed, that was part of the TPE virtual experience, as well as Duke at Kushan University in China. So a lot of universities have begun forming these different partnerships. And I love that Tikesha mentioned Miami of Ohio because I used to work there. So I'm very familiar with that model in Luxembourg. One of the other questions that came in here, which I think is very interesting, is I'm interested in student affairs in an Asian country in the future. But I think this can apply to a lot of other countries as well. What recommendations do you all have when it comes to language training? So yeah, I see all of you trying to, so go ahead.
I'll just jump on really quickly. I don't speak Mandarin, but I have spent some time in Singapore and Hong Kong in the past 2 years. And I will say, you know, it might be easier to start in a place where English is one of the first languages, right? So Singapore, Hong Kong are two places certainly that you could look at. But for that was one of the questions that I didn't know was specific to Asia. But one of the things to make yourself even more attractive to international employers, learn another language, right? Learn one or more other languages, I would say. I keep hearing the Babbel ads. I haven't looked at it, but check out Babbel, check out Rosetta Stone, that's still around. Take advantage of the international students on your campuses that speak these languages, and have coffee with them. Have a Zoom happy hour where you talk in their native language. They can be your support system as you start learning. But I would say it's never going to hurt you to speak another language, right? So regardless of where in the world you want to end up, even if it's remaining here in the US, I would encourage you definitely to start tackling that second language if you haven't already.
I totally agree with Jane. Living here in the Netherlands, thankfully, probably 95 to 99% of the people here speak English. I do not speak much Dutch. I understand a little bit. It is not an easy language. But with me possibly getting a permanent residency here, that's something I'm going to have to tackle. And I'm excited about it because it's just going to give me more leeway. But as we encourage our students as they come study abroad, you should learn a little bit. Our program is really based on around a lot of independent travel. And we talk about knowing a few phrases, a few things before you go visit somewhere. Don't make the assumption. I always make the joke, don't be that American assuming you're in Europe that everywhere, because certain countries, their English isn't as fluent. Places like Italy, that, it's not as fluent as the Netherlands is. So, understanding a few things, especially so many students are coming with allergies and food, like you really need to know what to ask for. And we have, resources we share with students around that, but that also encourages, being resourceful and learning a little bit of the language. Parisians are very keen on that, and that you at least try. To speak a little French when you come in. So I know when I'm in Paris, I was just there visiting one of our partner institutions, Paris College of Art, this September. And I'm always reminded the 5 or 6 times I've been there to brush up. So if they see you trying, there's appreciation, respect that you've at least tried. Even if you're being choppy with it, you're trying. So remember that also too.
And something I would add, especially with the travel piece, is for those of you who are able to travel, or if you do travel for just personal reasons, when you go to these countries, look at the universities that are there and reach out to the folks who work there and ask them, hey, can I set up an informational interview? I'm here. I did this. I went to Cuba 3 years ago for my best friend's bachelorette party, and I left them for half a day to go meet with some folks who worked at the Universidad de La Habana. And this was just half day. I don't speak Spanish. I kind of do a little bit. I learned it growing up. But this was a personal trip. But because I knew there was a university in that country, I went and connected with the folks who lived there and who was working there, not all their lives, but their professional lives. So don't be scared of those opportunities to hey, I'm maybe going to Mexico. Let me go see, is there a university in Mexico I can go and connect with? Maybe a professor who works there, folks who work in residential life, or, their versions of residential life. That's helpful too.
Yeah, and we're starting to wind down on time, and I think what I've appreciated so far is just learning about how we can not only understand the resources that are given in here, but also how to navigate some of those language barriers. Because I think even learning some of the conversational speech of the country that you may be looking at or anything like that is also important. But as we wind down our time here, in all the topics that we have talked about, what would be 2 pieces of advice that you would give to folks as they are navigating their own process in either trying to work abroad, or if an international student who's trying to work here in the US, what are 2 pieces of advice you'd want to give to folks who are on this call right now as they're navigating what their own process is looking like?
Yeah, I can start. So for my international folks, whether you're currently studying in the US or you're trying to get a job in the US, just make peace with the fact that the job search process is going to be long and hard. You're going to have to start before your cohort mates, and you might not end before everyone else does. For folks who know me in this call, I had a job offer in April, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is great. And then 2 days later, the director called me back and was like, actually, HR says that we can't sponsor your visa. Like, you can work here a year for OPT, but we can't sponsor your visa. And I was like, what? This is not what we agreed on. So then I had to kind of look back at other schools I'd applied to and I had gotten offers from. Understanding what's important to you. So folks always ask me, Abigail, at what point do you tell an employer that you're international? I told folks, from that first interview, like, I'm Abigail Smith, I'm an international student, came here. Some folks don't feel as comfortable doing that. So understanding what you're comfortable with, especially what you're comfortable revealing about yourself in the job search process and interviews, because that's going to be key in helping you figure out where you want to go and helping your future employers understand, okay, they're international. Because I'll tell you this now, most hiring managers do not know anything about H-1B, anything about OPT, or field does not teach folks how to do this. So most times you have to advocate for yourself. You have to ask them, like when folks reach out to me because on the TPE website, really great. Folks will ask me like, hey, Abigail, we're interested in you to interview. And I would write back, it's like, hey, I love your institution. Seems cool. Do y'all sponsor visas? Because if not, I'm not going to waste my time and I'm not going to waste your time. So understanding what's important to you. Some folks are okay with just that year of OPT and working and figuring out. Some folks want to have that answer like, okay, if I come here and perform well, are y'all willing to sponsor my visa? And some hiring managers can give you that information, especially if they connect with HR. But it's not a personal thing on you if the school or if the hiring manager has no clue. It's just that they need to do more research on what their process at their school looks like. And not because it hasn't been done in the past means that it can't be done again. So just think about how you market yourself. So yeah, those two things, how you market yourself, and then also just preparing for a very long search, and then also having options. Don't let the US be your only option. If you know you can go back home, figure what that transition piece would look like. If you want to get another degree, figure out what that transition piece looks like. But the clock ticks really quickly when you're international folks, and knowing your options, being in it for the long haul, and then making sure you're advocating for yourself. And feel free to reach out. I'll put my email address below too.
I totally agree with what Abigail said. I'm so happy to see her here and having that connection, because as soon as she popped up, I was like, wait a minute, I know who that is. For me, I think doing diversity work, being in the center of my identities is also really key and important to where I go, where I work, what is covered in regards to myself and my family. Being a bit seasoned in the field now in my 40s, there are things I know my worth. Being Black, queer, and abroad is appealing to a lot of institutions, and I know that. So I'm making sure that when I go into the door, these are the things I need if we're in a country or place. I'm not too worried about going to countries or places that may not recognize my partnership, but is the institution going to recognize it and the benefits that I need for it? So don't be afraid to ask those questions, because you bring a lot to the table. If this institution is reaching out to you and asking you to apply, or they're really catering towards you, ask for what you need to be happy, healthy, and thriving. If you're going to do this abroad thing, you should be happy in what you're doing. If you're leaving what what's different, leaving what you're used to, you need to be in a place where you're going to be happy. So making sure that you do that. And I go back to what I said in the beginning, don't stop turning things down that may help you later on in skill sets. I feel like I'm seeing a lot of that in young professionals because they're not being paid for it. And I think I find myself, I'm a bit of an old school student affairs person. It's just like, yeah, they ask you to do it, you do it. And it's just, but what I've learned is that I've made sure all that skill sets I remember and I add it to my resume. And that's how I got to where I am. If you can, don't sit in just one area. Res Life, I give it Res Life. I did it for 6 years. I think it's the job. If you can do that, you can probably do anything else in higher ed. But doing, orientation, doing Title IX work, doing conduct, doing diversity work, all of that is gonna, pay off for things you want to do. So as you're moving around, always, say, if an area that you're interested in, you don't know much about, how can I help out? How can I do a pseudo internship in that area to help them out with a project that's coming up? So, make sure you're getting out there. Don't overdo and burn yourself out, but make sure you're enjoying what you're doing and getting those experiences. That's what I got.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with either of you more. Absolutely. I think, this is such a challenging time everywhere, right? And I can't even imagine what it must be like to be in your graduate program right now and have that thought of the kind of looming job search, if that's where you are, if you're a mid-career professional and you're wanting to get yourself abroad and borders are closed, like it can seem like you're asking for the impossible, but it's not, right? The things are going to open back up again. And some of the amazing things that have come out of this current situation are that we're using Zoom and we're connecting in ways across the world that we haven't before. And so use this to your advantage, right? So think about some of the, I guess my first kind of piece of advice would be for those who like really wanted to get in with the study abroad or the international education office at your institution, but that didn't work out, they're full and whatnot. Use all the other local resources that are around you to gain that international experience, right? So I keep mentioning this. I've mentioned it to my last breath. International students, every institution just about has them. They are probably the most underutilized resource on every campus in this country, right? So use your international student peers, your international colleagues, for those of you who are already in the workforce, and then look at your local communities, right? So I live in a small kind of bedroom community of Columbus, Ohio. So I live in Granville, which is where Denison University is, but we're only about 25 minutes from Columbus. Columbus has something called Columbus Council on World Affairs. They're a nonprofit organization who is dedicated to kind of making connections and increasing the global fluency of the local population. And so they do trainings on cross-cultural communication, global fluency, et cetera, et cetera. Almost every large city in the US has a council on world affairs. They are looking for volunteers. They put on programs that are free. They're all happening on Zoom right now, so they're easier to access. So look for those types of opportunities in your areas. And then I think also similar kind of to what Tikesha has shared, my background in terms of my working experience has never actually been in student affairs. All of my roles have always fallen underneath academic affairs, so study abroad and international student advising at Ohio State at the time, that all went up through academic affairs. And then when I left the institution and was working for a study abroad company, I guess in some ways that was the closest I got to being working with student affairs, because often the campus liaisons that I was working with were in the student affairs side of the house. But then I went and I was an academic advisor in the College of Business. So again, under academic affairs, all of those skills are incredibly transferable. And if you find yourself in an academic advising position, certainly at a large institution where those are typically professionally trained higher ed administrators, you are going to have international students in your population, in your portfolio. And so that's, again, another way to get that international experience. So kind of sum it all up in that: connect, absolutely make connections. I hope that all of you will connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll put my email here as well. I think you can see that all of us really love to share kind of how we got here and what advice and experience we have. And we never stop learning. We always want to learn from each other and make new connections. So yeah, just take advantage of that.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much to our panelists for providing a really great insight from your experience and your knowledge. I know I've learned a lot, and I have like a ton more questions, but we are right now out of time. So I just want to thank our three panelists again, Jane, Abigail, and Tikesha, for spending some time with us today. And this session will be recorded and sent out to everyone who had registered for the event. So you will definitely get a portion of this. And then also, please remember to follow us, TPE, on our social medias at Twitter at 365TPE using the hashtag TPE365. Follow us on Instagram at The Placement Exchange, all one word. And then finally, follow us on Facebook, The Placement Exchange, because we've got some great things that are going to be up and coming over the next few months. And so we're really excited to begin. So did I. We're really excited to engage with you all as employers, participants, friends of TPE. We're just really excited to continue on in this process. So we will go ahead and end the webinar here. And again, thank you to our three panelists for taking time with us today. And I wish you all the best in the rest of your semester, quarter. I just wish you a smooth ending to your academic term. So until then, have a great day and wish you well.